Have you ever sat in a room full of people who once loved you and realized the silence wasn't theirs? It was yours. I'm Nancy Whitmore, 61 years old, former San Francisco Chronicle investigative legend. The woman who made politicians cry on camera, who could smell a lie 3 sentences in, who built a career on exposing narcissists, predators, and frauds. And last November, in my own kitchen on Cortlandt Avenue, I finally heard how loud my silence had been for 40 years. This is the story of the weekend I forced my daughter, my ex-husband, and the woman who had carried me through 35 years to come back to this little blue Victorian in Bernal Heights. Because I still believed one good conversation could fix everything. It didn't. It broke the last mirror I had left. Let me take you back to Friday evening, November 10th. The night the fog came early and thick, rolling up from the Mission like wet cotton. The Tamale lady on 24th Street was already packing up her cart, calling it a night. I stood at my kitchen window, watching the streetlights blur into halos, waiting. My house smelled like rosemary chicken. I'd spent 4 hours cooking. 4 hours. I couldn't remember the last time I'd cooked anything that wasn't microwaved. The dining table was set for 4. Good china. The plates my mother left me, the ones I'd kept wrapped in newspaper for 23 years because they were too nice for regular use. Tonight felt like it required something breakable. I was wearing the navy cashmere sweater Clara gave me 6 Christmases ago, still with the tags on. I'd kept it in tissue paper, saving it. For what? For this. For the moment when I'd prove I could still be the mother she needed. The ex-wife Oliver remembered fondly. The mentor Marisol deserved. I checked my phone. Clara's text came in at 6:14, stuck on 101, there in 30. Oliver's text, parking. Marisol didn't text. She never did. She just showed up. That's who she was. 35 years as my assistant, my researcher, my everything. She knew I needed reliability more than words. The doorbell rang at 6:37. Oliver stood on my porch, grayer than I remembered, wearing that same brown jacket he'd had since the 90s. Behind him, the street dropped away toward the Mission, lights twinkling through the fog like a postcard. He was holding something. A book. No, a journal. My stomach did a little flip I couldn't explain. Nance, he said. Just that. My name. Flat. Come in, please. He stepped inside, and the house suddenly felt smaller. We'd bought this place together in '89, back when Bernal Heights was still affordable, back when we thought we'd raise kids here and grow old, watching the city spread out beneath us. He raised Clara here. I raised stories. Where do you want me? He asked, like he was a guest at a hotel. Dining room. I made chicken. Your recipe. The one with the lemon. Something flickered across his face. Not quite a smile. More like pain, trying to remember how to be something else. Clara arrived 17 minutes later, 33 years old now, wearing all black like she was attending a funeral. Maybe she was. She had her grandmother's eyes and my jawline, the stubborn one that won't quit even when it should. She was carrying a shoebox. What's that? I asked, trying to sound casual, motherly. You'll see. That's when I should have known. That's when every instinct I'd honed tracking down corruption and lies should have kicked in. But this was my daughter, my family. I was blind because I wanted to be. Marisol was the last to arrive. 7:02. She walked in without knocking, like she had for 35 years, and she looked at me the way you look at a house you used to live in. With recognition and distance, she wasn't carrying anything. Saturday. We ate. The chicken was dry. Nobody said so, but I could tell. I'd forgotten to baste it because I was too busy checking my reflection, making sure I looked like someone worth forgiving. I tried. God, I tried. I asked Clara about her work at the nonprofit. I asked Oliver about his boat. I asked Marisol about her daughter's college applications. They answered, politely, like strangers on a bus making small talk to pass the time. Then Clara put her fork down. Mom, she said, and the words sounded wrong in her mouth. Too formal, too final. I need to play you something. She opened the shoebox. Inside were cassette tapes. Old ones, the kind we used to record interviews on, the kind I'd stored in the garage and forgotten about. She pulled out a small player, the kind you buy at Walgreens for $12, and pressed play. My voice filled the room. Clara, honey, I need you to tell me exactly what happened at school today. Don't leave anything out. Who said what first? What was the teacher wearing? How did it make you feel? On a scale of 1 to 10. My 8-year-old daughter's voice, small and confused. Mommy, I just want to go play. After you answer my questions. This is important, sweetheart. You want to help Mommy, don't you? The tape kept playing. I kept interviewing my own child like she was a source. Like she was a story I needed to crack. Oliver slid the journal across the table toward me, my handwriting on the cover, 2002. Marisol said nothing. She just watched me, waiting. And I realized, sitting there in my good china and my cashmere sweater with the tags finally cut off, that I had Fort Height hours until everything I'd ever built turned to ash. I just didn't know it yet. Clara set the Pete's coffee box on the table between the rosemary chicken nobody was eating and the Mission Dolores candle I'd lit to make the room feel warmer. It didn't work. The room felt like a courtroom. 47, she said, opening the lid. I counted them twice. Inside were microcassettes. The small kind that fit in a Sony Pressman recorder, the kind I used to carry everywhere back when digital wasn't quite good enough yet, back when you needed tape to prove what someone really said. Each cassette had a label in my handwriting. Dates, names, Clara's name, over and over, 1997 through 2011. I found these in your garage last month, Clara said, her voice steady in that way people sound when they've rehearsed something 1,000 times. When you asked me to grab your Christmas decorations. They were in a box marked Research Materials 19952015. She pulled out the old Sony Pressman. I'd forgotten I still had it. Silver, battered, with a crack across the speaker from the time I dropped it chasing a city supervisor down the steps of City Hall. Oliver shifted in his chair. Marisol folded her hands on the table like she was praying, but her eyes were on me, sharp, waiting. Clara pressed play, static first. Then, my voice, younger, rushed. Clara, honey, I need you to walk me through the morning routine again. What time did you wake up? Did you brush your teeth before or after breakfast? Did Mom seem different to you? A child's voice, maybe 7 years old, tired. Mommy, can we just have dinner without the recorder? Sweetie, this is how we remember things accurately. This is important. Now, when Dad left for work, did he kiss Mom goodbye? I remembered that tape. I was working on a profile of divorced fathers, the ones who claimed they still showed affection, still tried. I needed a child's perspective, my child's perspective. I was teaching you observation skills, I said, my throat tight. Clara stopped the tape. I was 7. She pressed play on another one. Clara, on a scale of 1 to 10, how angry did Mrs. Patterson's comment make you feel? Mom, I don't want to talk about this right now. Just answer the question, honey. We'll have ice cream after. Rocky Road, your favorite. Another tape. Clara, describe the principal's office. What color were the walls? Where was he sitting? Can I please just go to my room? Another. Clara, when the other girls excluded you at recess, did you cry immediately or did you wait? Each tape was a knife. Clara had dozens of them. She played 5 more. Each one, my voice asking questions, probing, pushing. Each one, Clara sounding smaller, more exhausted, more resigned. Oliver wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at his hands. Marisol's expression hadn't changed. She'd heard some of these before. She'd been there, transcribing them, helping me code the data, pulling quotes for articles about childhood resilience, divorce impact, educational trauma. "Stop," I said. "Clara, please." She didn't stop. She pulled out a cassette from the very bottom of the box. The label read, "The 17th of April, 2008. Clara, 16. Post-breakup interview." "This one," Clara said, and her voice cracked for the first time. "This one you need to hear." She pressed play. Sobbing. Raw, teenage, heartbroken sobbing. My daughter, 16 years old, crying so hard she could barely breathe. Then my voice, calm, clinical. "Clara, I know this is difficult, but I need you to articulate what you're feeling. Is it betrayal? Rejection? Both?" More sobbing. "Sweetheart, use your words. When Jake told you he wanted to see other people, where were you standing? Was anyone else around?" "Mom, please. I just want to be alone." "We're almost done. Just a few more questions. Did he touch your shoulder when he said it? Did he cry?" The tape kept rolling. 3 hours and 22 minutes. I knew because I'd logged it in my research database under Teen Romantic Rejection Study, Subject C. Subject C. My daughter was Subject C. I'd used quotes from that interview in a 5-part series on adolescent mental health. Anonymized, of course. Changed enough details to protect her privacy, I'd told myself. The series got picked up by 6 major outlets. It was nominated for a Pulitzer, my 3rd nomination. I didn't win, but I got close. Close enough to add it to my bio, close enough to leverage it into better speaking fees, close enough to matter. Clara stopped the tape. The kitchen was silent except for the fog pressing against the windows and the sound of my own breathing. Too fast, too shallow. I tried to laugh. It came out wrong, strangled. "I was teaching you resilience," I said. "I was showing you how to process pain, how to turn suffering into understanding." Clara looked at me the way you look at a stranger who just said something unforgivable. "I was 16, she said. "My heart was broken for the first time, and you interviewed me for 3 hours. You took notes. You logged my crying patterns, and then you used me to boost your career." I anonymized it. "Mom." Her voice was so quiet it was almost a whisper. Jake's name wasn't in the article. The school's name wasn't in the article. But my pain was, every word of it. "And you didn't ask my permission. You didn't even tell me you were using it until the series came out and your editor congratulated you at my 17th birthday dinner." I remembered that dinner, Il Fornaio on Market Street. My editor had sent flowers to the table. Clara had excused herself to the bathroom and didn't come back for 20 minutes. I'd thought she was being dramatic. "You taught me one thing," Clara said, closing the box of cassettes. "You taught me that I only mattered when I was your source, when I had a story you could use. When my suffering was interesting enough to win you awards." Oliver stood up. The chair scraped against my kitchen floor, the sound harsh and final. "I think we're done with dinner," he said. But we weren't done. We'd barely started. 2:17 in the morning, the doorbell rang. I was still awake, still sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by 47 cassette tapes, each one a tiny time bomb Clara had left behind when she walked out 3 hours earlier. Marisol had followed her. Oliver had stayed exactly 12 minutes longer, long enough to wash his plate and fold his napkin, movements so careful and deliberate they felt like goodbye. The doorbell rang again. I walked through my dark house to the front door, the floorboards creaking in all the familiar places. Through the frosted glass I could see a shape. Tall. Oliver's shape. I opened the door. He was already halfway down the porch steps, moving fast for a 64-year-old man. On my doormat sat a bundle wrapped in rubber bands. Old rubber bands, the kind that crack and leave residue on your fingers. "Oliver, wait." He didn't turn around. He just raised one hand, a wave that meant don't, and disappeared into the fog rolling thick up Cortlandt Avenue. His car started, taillights blurred red through the mist. Gone. I picked up the bundle. It was a reporter's notebook, my reporter's notebook. The kind with the spiral binding at the top, narrow-ruled, fits in a jacket pocket. The cover was water-stained and bent. On the front, in my handwriting, Research Notes 20012003. I carried it inside, closed the door, stood in my hallway holding evidence of something I couldn't name yet but could feel pressing against my chest like a fist. I climbed the stairs to the landing where the Street Francis lamp sits, the one my mother gave me when I bought this house, the one I've never replaced even though the shade is yellowed and torn. I sat on the top step like I used to when Clara was little and couldn't sleep, and I'd read to her from up here, my voice carrying down into her room. I opened the notebook. My handwriting, dense, coded, efficient. The way I wrote when I was chasing something, when I was building a case, when I was hunting. Page 12. A header in red ink. Interview techniques that work. Underneath, a bulleted list. Silence after question, minimum 8 sekund, farce elaboration. Soft voice plus hard question equals guard down. Repeat their own words back slowly. Adds weight, triggers emotion. Mirror their body language, then shift. They follow, you lead. Ask about childhood before asking about crime, opens vulnerability pathway. I remembered writing this. I remembered feeling brilliant, scientific, like I'd cracked a code nobody else understood. I turned pages. Page 27, triggering tears on cue. Strategic empathy, hand on forearm, 3-count pause. Use phrase I can only imagine, subject fills silence with confession. Bring up mother or father, depending on subject gender profile. Position tissue box within reach but not obvious, creates safety signal. My stomach turned. Page 41, underline twice. Useful pressure points by subject. Politicians, legacy, children's respect, historical judgment. CEOs, competency, peer comparison, masculinity when applicable, clergy, hypocrisy gap, personal sin versus public position. Mothers, daughter's future, protection instinct, guilt regarding balance. I'd color-coded them, green for emotional leverage, yellow for reputational risk, red for guaranteed breakdown. I'd made a science of breaking people. Then I found the page that made me stop breathing. Page 58. No header, just a name. Oliver, useful guilt buttons. Underneath, in my handwriting, tiny and precise. Father abandonment history, age 11. Fear of repeating father's pattern with Clara. Need to be seen as present, reliable, stable. Financially insecure despite income, childhood poverty triggers. Cannot tolerate being called selfish, overcompensates. Use phrase Clara needs to override any personal boundary. I had mapped my own husband like he was a target. I kept reading, page after page, names I recognized, sources who'd given me career-making interviews, the police chief who admitted to evidence tampering, the school superintendent who confessed to stealing funds, the pastor who broke down on camera about the affair. I'd thought I was good at my job. I was good at breaking people until they gave me what I needed. The techniques I'd used, the strategies I'd developed, they had names now. I'd learned them later. I'd reported on them. I'd won awards exposing powerful men who did exactly what I documented in this notebook. Gaslighting, emotional manipulation, coercive interviewing, exploiting trauma for gain. I was 20 pages from the end when I found the section labeled Story Opportunities, Personal Circle. Clara's Anxiety, possible series on childhood mental health. Oliver's father wound, angle for generational trauma piece. Marisol's immigration story, pending DACA coverage, needs personal narrative. I had categorized the people I loved by their usefulness to my career. The sun was coming up, gray light bleeding through the fog, turning my street from black to charcoal. I heard a car door close, footsteps on my walkway. I went downstairs, opened the front door. Oliver was sitting on my front steps, holding a paper cup from Phil's coffee. He was watching the fog crawl up Bernal Hill the way it used to on Sunday mornings in 1989, when we'd sit here together before Clara woke up, when we thought we had time for everything. He didn't look at me. "I kept it," he said quietly. 22 years. In a box in my storage unit in the Tenderloin. I thought about throwing it away 100 times. "Why didn't you?" "Because I thought one day you might need proof." He finally turned, looked up at me standing in my doorway. "Proof that you weren't always the good guy." The fog kept climbing. Somewhere down on Mission Street, the city was waking up, buses running, coffee shops opening, people starting their Sunday like nothing had changed. Everything had changed. I was holding evidence of exactly who I'd been, written in my own hand, undeniable. And I still had 24 hours left. 11:17 Sunday morning. My phone started vibrating on the kitchen counter where I'd left it the night before. One buzz, then another. Then it didn't stop. Text messages, emails. Notifications stacking so fast the screen couldn't keep up. Names I hadn't seen in years. Colleagues, former editors, people I'd mentored, people I'd beaten for awards. I picked it up. 43 messages in 2 minutes. Still climbing. The first text was from my old Chronicle editor, retired now, living somewhere in Sonoma. "Nancy. What the hell is this?" Attached was a link. YouTube. A video. 11 minutes and 32 seconds long. Posted 19 minutes ago. The thumbnail showed a woman standing in front of the Diego Rivera mural at 24th and Mission BART Plaza. The colors behind her were vivid even through my cracked phone screen, blues and reds and golds. The mural that showed the history of California, the workers, the struggle, the hands that built everything. The woman in the frame was Marisol Ortega. My Marisol, 53 years old. Gray streaking through black hair she'd stopped dyeing 2 years ago, wire-rimmed glasses, a blue jacket I'd seen her wear 1,000 times. The title of the video, 35 Years of Invisible Work, the woman behind Nancy Whitmore's awards. My hands started shaking. I pressed play. Marisol's face filled my screen. She wasn't crying, she wasn't angry, she looked calm. Resolved. Like someone who'd finally decided to tell the truth after holding it in for so long it had calcified into bone. "My name is Marisol Ortega," she said. Her voice was steady. "For 35 years, I worked as Nancy Whitmore's assistant. That's what she called me. Her assistant. And technically, that was my job title on paper. But let me tell you what I actually did." She pulled out a piece of paper, started reading. "The corruption exposé on City Hall that won the Pulitzer in 2004. I spent 8 months tracking financial records through shell companies. I found the offshore accounts. I built the timeline. Nancy conducted the final interviews and wrote the narrative." She looked up at the camera. The byline said Nancy Whitmore. The acceptance speech mentioned her team, once, in passing. Another page. The police brutality investigation that became a nationwide conversation in 2009. I interviewed 47 families. I compiled medical records. I cross-referenced incident reports for a year and a half. Nancy appeared on national television to discuss the findings. She kept going. Award after award, story after story. Each one, Marisol described the work. The months of research, the documents obtained, the sources cultivated, the data analyzed. Each one, Nancy Whitmore's name in lights while Marisol Ortega was introduced as my assistant, if she was lucky enough to be in the room at all. "I'm not saying Nancy didn't work," Marisol said. "She did. She's a brilliant writer, a powerful interviewer. She knows how to craft a narrative that makes people care. But the foundation of every story, the architecture of every investigation, that was built by people like me." She folded the papers, put them in her jacket pocket. "For 35 years, I told myself it was enough to do good work, to know the truth was getting out there, to believe that credit didn't matter as much as impact." She smiled. It was sad and small and true. But credit does matter, because credit becomes opportunity. It becomes legitimacy. It becomes the next job, the next platform, the next chance to speak and be heard. And for 35 years, Nancy took that from me. The video cut. New scene. Marisol walking down 24th Street, the camera following her. You could see the neighborhood around her, the fruit vendors, the murals on every building. The smell of the mission coming through the screen somehow, the tacos and the incense and the bus exhaust. She walked into La Taqueria. The camera stayed outside, shooting through the window. You could see her ordering, pointing at the menu, nodding, smiling at the guy behind the counter who'd probably made her burrito 100 times before. She came out carrying 2 foil-wrapped bundles, carnitas super burritos, the kind that weigh 2 pounds and cost $12 and are worth every penny. She walked half a block to where a man sat against the wall of the BART station, older, weathered. A sign next to him said vet. Hungry. Anything helps. God bless. Marisol handed him one of the burritos, sat down next to him on the sidewalk. They talked for a minute. You couldn't hear what they were saying, but you could see him laughing. See her laughing too. She stood up, looked directly at the camera. This man just thanked me by name, she said. He asked me my name and he used it. Nancy never did. Not once in 35 years did she ask me how I wanted to be credited. Not once did she share a stage or a byline or a moment of recognition. She started walking away. The camera followed her down into the BART station, down the escalator, toward the turnstiles. The last shot was her back, disappearing into the crowd of Sunday travelers, becoming anonymous again, the way she'd been for 35 years behind my name. The video ended. I looked at the view count. 483,000 views in 21 minutes. I refreshed. 612,000. Refreshed again. 890,000. The comments were coming too fast to read, but I caught pieces, fragments. This is everywhere journalism. I worked in newsrooms for 20 years. This is exactly how it goes. Nancy Whitmore interviewed me in 2006, and I always wondered who did the research. Now I know. Marisol deserves every award Nancy has. My phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I answered without thinking. Nancy Whitmore? Yes. This is Joaquin Martinez from the Chronicle. We're running a story about allegations of credit theft spanning your career. Do you have a comment? I hung up. Refreshed the video again. 1.4 million views. By noon, the Chronicle homepage had a new headline. Legendary SF reporter accused of decades-long credit theft. The article included a photo. Me accepting my second Pulitzer nomination. Smiling. Confident. Marisol visible in the background, blurred, holding my briefcase. I was alone in my house. The fog was rolling in. And the entire world was finally seeing what I'd spent 40 years making sure they wouldn't. Sunday, 6:37 in the evening, the light dying fast the way it does in November, the sun dropping behind Twin Peaks and taking the warmth with it. Everyone had left. Clara at noon, after I tried to apologize and she held up one hand, said, "Mom, I can't do this right now," and walked out. Oliver at 2, after sitting on my porch steps for 3 hours not saying anything, just drinking coffee and watching the fog thicken until he finally stood up, looked at me through the screen door, and said, "I hope you figure it out, Nance." Marisol never came back. Why would she? She'd said everything she needed to say to 1.8 million people. I was the last person she needed to hear from. I sat in my kitchen until the shadows stretched across the floor and the house got cold. I didn't turn on the heat. I didn't deserve to be comfortable. I put on my jacket. The old REI one from 1994, faded green, zipper broken. I walked out my front door and up Cortlandt Avenue toward the peak of Bernal Heights. The stairs are steep. 237 steps carved into the hillside, winding up through ice plant and wild grass and houses clinging to the slope like they might slide off any minute. I used to run these stairs when Clara was little, when I needed to clear my head between stories, when I was chasing the next big thing. I wasn't chasing anything now. At the top, the swing. Someone put it there years ago, hung it from a big wooden frame, just 2 ropes and a plank, facing west toward downtown and the bay. On clear days, you can see the Golden Gate Bridge. On foggy days like this, you can see nothing. Just white. The city disappears. The towers, the bridges, the noise. All of it gone. I sat on the swing. My feet touched the ground. I'm too old to swing properly, too tired to pump my legs and fly the way I used to when I brought Clara here when she was 6 and she'd scream higher, "Mommy," higher, and I'd push her until she was just a silhouette against the sky. I pulled out my phone. 2,416 notifications, emails, mentions, messages from reporters asking for comment, former colleagues distancing themselves, a few defenders, the old guard guys who still think loyalty matters more than truth. I opened my notes app, started typing, to Clara. Send to her cell number, not email. Make it personal. Make it direct. I listened to tape number 23 again, the one from your 16th birthday party. You were right, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to hear me say it without a recorder running. I pressed send before I could edit it, before I could make it prettier or more articulate or more impressive. To Oliver. I read every page of the notebook. Thank you for keeping the worst of me safe all these years. I'm sorry I made you the keeper of evidence against myself. I'm sorry I gave you something you needed to keep. Send. To Marisol. This one was harder. My fingers hovered over the screen. What do you say to someone who gave you 35 years and you gave them nothing back? What apology covers that? What words make it right? There aren't any. I typed anyway. You were never my anything. You were the better journalist. I'm sorry I spent 35 years making sure no one noticed. You deserved every byline, every award, every moment of recognition I took. Send. 3 messages, 3 decades of harm. It wasn't even close to enough. But it was true. And it was sent. And there was no performance in it, no audience, no way to spin it into something that made me look better. I opened Twitter. 43,000 followers. People who'd followed me for breaking news, for sharp takes, for that hit of self-righteousness that comes from watching someone expose the bad guys. I was the bad guy. I deleted the app. Instagram. 12,000 followers. Photos of awards ceremonies and speaking engagements, and that carefully curated version of a life spent speaking truth to power. Deleted. Every Google alert with my name. Every notification set up to tell me when someone mentioned Nancy Whitmore, when someone praised my work, when someone added to the mythology I'd spent 40 years building. Gone. My phone felt lighter. Or maybe I did. I sat on the swing as the fog rolled in thicker, erasing the last bits of city below me. The radio tower on Sutro disappeared. The Bay Bridge lights vanished. The buildings downtown became ghosts. Then nothing. For the first time in 61 years, I wasn't looking for the next question, wasn't scanning for the next story, wasn't calculating how to turn someone's pain into my platform. I was just sitting, breathing, listening. The city sounds came up through the fog, car horns on Mission Street, a dog barking, somewhere far off, a siren. The foghorns from the bay, low and mournful, warning ships away from the rocks. And closer, down on Cortlandt near 24th, I heard it. The tamale lady's bell, that bright cheerful ringing she does at the end of her route, letting the neighborhood know she's got one more round to make before calling it a night. I'd heard that bell for 32 years, ever since I moved to this neighborhood, and I'd never once stopped to buy tamales, never learned her name, Never said more than a polite nod if we passed on the street. She was part of the background of my important life. The bell rang one last time, then stopped. She was heading home. I stayed on the swing until full dark. Until my hands went numb and my breath came out in clouds. Until the fog was so thick, I couldn't see my own feet. No dramatic music playing in my head. No soaring revelation. No promise that I'd wake up tomorrow and be a different person, better, redeemed, worthy. Just a 61-year-old woman sitting alone on a hill, finally understanding that the biggest narcissist she ever exposed wasn't on television. It was in the mirror. And that knowledge, that tiny, terrible, true beginning, was all I had. It might not be enough, but at least it was real.